Well, I was hoping not to have to watch this live like I did the other day, but it didn't fucking work right. So let's go back to the beginning and fucking do it right the way we did the other day. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. Let's see if I can get this show started now. And let me mute this crap here, because I can't be listening and watching at the same time, apparently. Fuck it.
Ew, ow, yuck, this is, uh, yeah, this is horrible. Uh, Skeptic, what the hell do you want? Skeptic, there's like sticky white and gray fluff everywhere. What did you do? Ugh, what are you blaming me for? Well, who else is gray and white? Do you think about the llama? The llama? Yeah, drama llama. What about him? Yeah, he was, up all night. The boss put up a video going after Gman. Going after Gman? Well, what did Gman do this time? Yeah, well, you know how, like, Gman was involved in his kid not becoming a Christian? Well, yeah, that was kind of obvious. I mean, Gman keeps saying that, like, when you become a Christian, that God makes you a new person, and that's what made, oh, G-Man the way he is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's not a good approach, is it? I definitely say not. Yeah, G-Man's kind of a tool. But yeah, the boss did a video about the whole thing, and yeah, the drama llama got a little busy watching it, and yeah, it was, yeah, I've been trying to see if I can get this place cleaned up all day. This is so gross! Ugh! Well, I guess this is just what happens when some fuckstick like G-Man decides to go after the boss. I mean, there's gotta be some resolution to this. I mean, it all started with, like, him going after Jade and all this stuff because she's, you know, a lesbian. Now, granted, she's a celibate lesbian, but somehow being celibate makes her a practicing lesbian? And then it became that she has to be...
Okay. Yeah, this is just not going well today. I'm not sure what the hell the difficulty was a moment ago. A lot of the stream stuff it doesn't seem to be working right. I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm going to see what I can do to fix it. Let's see if I can find the current active stream. Its listing is Insomnia Shuffle erroneously. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to go in and fix the title and everything later. At least it's coming up here, though. I'm going to have to stream this the old-fashioned way. It should be restarting in just a second. I'm really sorry about all the fucking fiasco with this shit, guys. Hey, Pluto. Hey, Spooky. And hi, Bobby. Hello, folks that are out there paying attention. Yeah, sorry about that crap. This particular broadcast isn't going to be for most people. G-Man's been going after Jade for a few days now and issued a challenge to basically come up with a biblical justification for the morality of same-sex relationships. Now, granted, he wasn't even close to that eloquent, but I put together a little bit of a presentation based upon, in part, a conversation I had and some links I found. And I'm just going to get the damn thing to play while the playing's good. Everything seems to be mostly lined up here. I'm just going to have to frickin' deal with it basically as it is. Let me just move these text boxes up above that. Unfortunately, sometimes technical difficulties end up winning the day, and I'm not going to let them win this time, but let's get this shit show going, because Kid Creeps is driving me nuts right now. If there's any audio issues, let me know. Everything in theory should be fine. I was hoping to be able to do something else while this was running, but apparently I won't be able to. So, yeah.
Ew, ow, yuck, this is, yeah! This is horrible!
Let me pause that for a second. No, actually, the point of it is to show that homosexuality isn't necessarily a problem with the teachings of the scriptures in the Bible. It's a fucking G-Man challenge. It's stupid shit. You know, things like compassion and whatnot don't enter into it. Anyway, let's just go with this thing.
Skeptic! What the hell do you want? Skeptic! There's like sticky white and gray fluff everywhere. What did you do? Ugh! What are you blaming me for? Well, who else is gray and white? Do you think about the llama? The llama? Yeah, drama llama. What about him? Yeah, he was up all night. The boss put up a video going after Gman. Going after Gman? Well, what did Gman do this time? Yeah, well, you know how like Gman was involved in his kid not becoming a Christian? Well, yeah, that was kind of obvious. I mean, Gman keeps saying that like when you become a Christian, that God makes you a new person, and that's what made G-Man the way he is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's not a good approach, is it? I definitely say not. Yeah, G-Man's kind of a tool. But yeah, the boss did a video about the whole thing, and yeah, the drama llama got a little busy watching it, and yeah, it was yeah. I've been trying to see if I can get this place cleaned up all day. This is so gross! Ugh! Well, I guess this is just what happens when some fuckstick like G-Man decides to go after the boss. I mean, there's got to be some resolution to this. I mean, it all started with like him going after Jade and all this stuff because she's, you know, a lesbian. Now, granted, she's a celibate lesbian, but somehow being celibate makes her a practicing lesbian. And then it became that she has to be condemning lesbians. I don't know what the solution is. I know. Let's talk about Jesus. The boss can do a Bible study. That'd be great. Wait a minute. Who the heck would want to see the boss do a Bible study? He's not a theist.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so the boss could teach G-Man what it is to be a Christian. I love it. Bible study, please, boss, please. Oh, I love you, please, the drama. Oh, drama llama ding dong. Oh, yeah, baby.
Ah!
Okay, I guess I'll do a Bible study and show G-Man what Christianity is actually supposed to be about.
Yeah, sorry, boss, I don't think I'm up for this one.
Come on, Skeptic, it won't be that bad.
Okay, just give me some idea what we're in for.
The number of people who actually attend G-Man's church is 1.
Yeah.
And that's G-Man. So nobody is a Christian.
All right, I guess I'm in.
It's kind of weird, but somebody needs to do it, right? The talk today will be about the Bible, the history of Judea, sexuality as it is referenced in the Bible, as well as some references to Judaic tradition, and some scripture readings for those of you who are into that kind of stuff. One of the problems that I run into when dealing with somebody like G-Man is that he just doesn't get things like cultural context, and he doesn't really pay attention to, you know, the Bible. Before the Ten Commandments, shortly after the whole Ark thing, there's one specific commandment that's never acknowledged by most Christians.
Sorry, my microphone wasn't working there, but yeah, go forth and multiply.
Now, this was kind of command number 1 because, you know, they wanted the people of Judea to be, as populous as the stars or as many as the stars. And this was a promise that was passed down time and time again. By the time you get to things like Levitical law and they start formalizing the Judaic law, the majority of the laws in Deuteronomy and Leviticus were passed down by God, or were these by the leaders of the time?
Now, that's an interesting one, 13, and I'll tell you for why. Let's go to, it's one of the Gospels. There's the bit where Christ says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you to turn the other cheek. Oh, it's in the bit I'm thinking about is the bit about divorce.
Yeah, this is actually Jesus speaking, if this part of I recall correctly.
Yeah, this is Jesus. Sorry, he's asked about divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
And about Moses, somebody says, so Moses gave us all these rules about divorcing our wives. And what say you? And Jesus says, Moses gave you those rules because of the hardness of your hearts. But I tell you that you can only put your wife away for adultery.
And we're not even talking Abraham yet. We're talking Moses at this point.
Yeah. So, and that bit there, though, and this is a bit that a lot of people miss, they use they use that passage in a number of ways. They'll use it as anti-gay because it's, you know, a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So they like to use that bit. And they miss the bit where it says, Moses told you that rule because of the hardness of your hearts. But I tell you. So it doesn't say God told you.
This is showing the differentiation between religious leaders and
The
teachings
actual
of
God.
not only
The
God
actual-
himself,
yeah.
but even the teachings of Jesus is where I was going with that. Sorry.
So what he's saying is, Moses told you this. And Moses had a reason for it. Because at the time, Moses is trying to herd 40,000 cats through the middle of the desert.
Now, at this point, you have Abraham handing down laws, and this is really, if I recall correctly, where the 614 laws, which are throughout Deuteronomy and Leviticus, really come into play.
Hey, you screwed up. It's 613 laws.
Fundy, let me continue. Now, the interesting thing is that there's this one quote G-Man likes to pull out, especially pertaining to me the other day, that he should probably look at the rest of it, because most of these laws he's citing, including the law in Leviticus that prohibits homosexuality, would have been passed down by Abraham. And in that verse in which he's saying basically Satan is your father, who's he referencing in that verse?
Boss? You're talking about the Mosaic law, you know, like Moses? We're not on Abraham yet.
Fundy, come on.
Okay, I'll just let you keep going. Even when you're wrong.
Do you know offhand?
And well, you see, here's the thing. He can say Satan is your father. But as far as I'm concerned, all are children of God.
Oh, but hang on, Fiona. If you actually look up that verse, who is that in condemnation against? Can you find
Now
that
that I
verse?
couldn't tell you offhand.
It's Abraham. He's actually speaking out to the Jews in the area, and he refers to Abraham as being the devil, and and does it as a metaphor that the devil is your father. And if you actually read through that segment, he's talking about Abraham and how they cling, instead of to the Lord, they cling to the words of Abraham. Once again, following laws passed down by a man and a man instead of following God.
Yes. And I mean, that goes back to the same thing with Moses. But this is the thing, and this is why I'm going back to that, but I'm going to look it up.
But in terms of the condemnation of homosexuality, you basically have the line in Leviticus, and then you have Paul, who was a member of the Sanhedrin, and as such was bringing forward all of his former Jewish biases. And in all the letters of Paul, you can kind of see them shining through.
Right, I've got it. Matthew 19. The Pharisees came unto him, tempting him, saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered them and said unto them, Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. They said unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorce and put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery.
What interests me in terms of G-Man's approach here, though, is that he's not simply going after homosexuality, he's going after lesbians in particular.
Yes.
And this shows a complete lack of understanding of the cultural context. Fiona, are you familiar with the Red Tent?
Vaguely.
The Red Tent was a place where women were sent to go. It was on the outskirts of town. This was while they were menstruating.
Yes.
Because they were unclean, not allowed to be around others. Well, we do have some records of what would happen at the Red Tent.
Ooh.
Now, this was a place no men were allowed at all. It was only women. And with the pain of menstruation, as well as things like the pain of childbirth, And what led up to that, there were certain practices that women would participate in with each other that would help ease the cramps.
Uh-huh.
And that involved masturbation.
Yes.
And this is a old tradition that was indeed part of the Red Tent, is women performing sexual acts in a manner of speaking on each other to ease those menstruation pains.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, during this time period, as part of the whole fruitful and multiply, and they're used to still look at it this way today, sex isn't supposed to be for enjoyment, it's supposed to be to reproduce, which goes back to that whole be fruitful and multiply. The
So then why
original
give women a
prohibition,
G-spot?
well, the whole prohibition, well, that's for your menstruation, you know, it was perfectly fine for women in that Red Tent, as long as there were no men around to do whatever they wanted with each other, ultimately.
But listen, I'll tell you what that's all about, 13, as far as I'm concerned. And you can call me a raging feminist if you want to. The men were jealous because the women could get each other off and the men couldn't get the women off.
Oh, that's fun. However, there's something a lot deeper to it, though. In terms
Sorry,
of...
my husband had a funny look in his face.
That's
there.
okay.
I forgot as soon as you said them.
But there was something, the thing is, people will talk about, oh, the women had to be separated and this is a bad thing. No, it really wasn't on a lot of levels. Women understand women better than men do, especially when it comes to these kind of things. It's just, you know, it's their biology. Of course, they know a little bit more about it than we do. That's kind of basic. Well, unless you're a gynecologist. But what would happen is this would be a time when only the women would be allowed in there when they were menstruating. Once again, no men at all. So this would be a chance for a woman that might not be getting along with a husband or might be having issues to have some time, quote, quote, to herself, where it's just her and a bunch of other women, and they're safe and they're protected, and they don't have to worry about men. Anything that they say in there was considered sacred. Anything they did in there was considered to be private and sacred. This was just a place for women. So on some levels, it wasn't entirely a negative. This is also where the gossip started. So if somebody was beating their wife, this is how people found out about it, is because it was mentioned in the Red Tent.
You see, you're not going to get any of that through to Gman. None of it.
Of course, he actually, in a conversation I had with him and Lasoyo, while saying that the cultural context is important, said he doesn't care and was pointing out things that are historical, but says they weren't biblical, they didn't count as historical.
Well, see, here's the thing. When you're tackling G-Man's nonsense, first of all, he always goes to Leviticus, a man shall not lie with a man as he lies with a woman, okay? Mm-hmm. That's actually talking about an act, okay?
It's also talking about an act that can't lead to reproduction, which links us back to that briefly, but yes, that's talking about an
act. But if you just go with literally what those words say, that a man mustn't lie with a man. And there was a thread last night, it was a celibate gay guy. And G-Man seems to think he's condemned as well. Because it seems, right, what G-Man does is he parrots out words and they bypass his brain, right? If he's, if let's say he was talking about flagging a channel for something, he can't talk about flagging a channel without putting the word false in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that phrase goes together. He can't use the word homosexual without putting practicing in front of it.
But at the same point, when somebody points that they're not practicing, he still insists that they're condemned, they should be damned and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and also, when he starts running his mouth, the word practicing goes back in again. It's because the word false always goes in front of flag. He doesn't realise it's a descriptor for flag.
I thought it was kind of funny that he accused me of not understanding Christianity, but as far as I understand, one of the cornerstones of Christian teaching is that everyone has, so to speak, their predilections, the sins that God has straddled them with, the tendencies, the impulses, etc., that their challenge in life is to overcome that, and while still trying to follow and lead a godly life. So wouldn't somebody that has this sexual attraction, that's denying that sexual attraction to some degree, and being celibate, be actually following God more than somebody that simply doesn't lust at all? Because this is the challenge God has put before them, and they are overcoming it.
But see, he's not grasped temptation. 13. And that is demonstrated beautifully in his story of the safe.
Yeah.
Because the very first time he ever told that story, I was in the hangout and I said to him, what I would have seen that as was, I've prayed for money, I desperately need money. And this is a test.
Yeah. So
This is a test. Because you cannot be
you
tempted.
can either go, God gave me money, or you can say, ooh, God tempted me with this, and I walked away because I realized that God was just trying to test me. And in his case, if that was a test, he failed.
Yeah. And I mean, I said to him, that's how I would have seen it. You hand in the money, and if nobody claims it within a certain amount of time, you get it. Anyway.
At that point, you could claim that God is one that presented
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he, because he's thinking on a really superficial level, he's not going to see that. And he will then go back to this, but even if you look at a woman with lust, then you're committing adultery in your mind. If you hate your brother, that you're murdering your brother. But I don't think he realises the difference between attraction and lust.
He clearly doesn't. I really doubt he understands the difference between love and lust, because lusting after somebody of the same sex would be far different than acting on it, for starters. But even more so, overcoming these temptations that are these challenges that God's put in front of you is kind of what Christianity's all about on some levels. Well, you know, there's the Jesus thing, obviously, that's the core of it, but this is one of the key lessons.
Yes, I mean, that's the whole point of God becoming human. Because he takes on this human form that is victim to all of the temptations of the flesh. And yet still remains without sin.
One of my reads on that was that in some ways, because people were like, well, why did he have to come down and sacrifice him? You know, the whole usual atheist shtick on that. My stance on that is, well, it's fine to be omniscient and know everything from, you know, that I'm up above looking down kind of vantage point. It's different to understand what it is to be in a state that you are incapable of being in. You know, he can't be in the state of being a man dealing with these kind of temptations. And my read of that was always, this was a way for God to better understand what it was to be us, so he could better understand us. And
the another thing that's been pointed out by various scholars is that the culture in which this was happening was a sacrificial culture. Whether it be pigeons or spotless lambs or whatever, it was a sacrificial culture. And they have it ingrained within them that the forgiveness of a sin required a sacrifice. And that is why Christ is called the Lamb of God. He's the paschal lamb, the spotless lamb. He's the spotless sacrifice. That's how you get the message through to a sacrificial culture.
I just want to say, Fiona, considering you're pulled up for not, I know you said worshipping then, for not preaching the Bible or whatever, I have never heard it explained to me like that, and that makes perfect sense to me.
And yeah, a lot of people won't. That's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, you know, God, again, was using a symbolism that the people understood. You have to speak to people within their own frame of reference. Eddie Izzard does a brilliant wee sketch about shopping for fruit and vegetables. And I think it was an avocado he's talking about. And he has to do this squeezy on the fruit. But he's got no frame of reference. He doesn't know what a right one should feel like. So doing a squeezy on the fruit doesn't help him at all. Until he has a frame of reference that this rock hard means bad and this soft means good. So he can do his squeezy until he's blue in the face and he's none the wiser.
I mean, there's a difference between understanding what humans do and their reasons for it and what have you. Then there's a very big difference between that and experientially understand what it is like to be tempted.
Yes. And also, I mean, you've got to remember.
You know, you can't tempt a perfect person, so he has to be made imperfect so he can be tempted.
Right,
And
except, not imperfect, but to be made of the flesh, because it's in the flesh that these sins are going to pop up, like anger, jealousy.
throwing over the table, etc. These are areas in which
Yeah.
that the
These
godly,
are,
complete, the absolute perfection
yeah,
is
they're part of being
tempered
human.
by being within the human shell.
Yeah. So what we have is Christ, who is in this fleshy form. So he is now can be victim to all the temptations and sins of the flesh, but he doesn't. He remains spotless. That's why he's the spotless sacrifice.
I always have this
The
weird
Paschal Lamb.
thought when G-Man starts getting on his rants. And I imagine, you know, Jesus standing there and you have the adulterous woman and there are all these people sitting there waiting to stone her. Jesus stands up and says, "He who is without sin, throw the first stone." And G-Man running for a rock and Jesus going, no, I remember when you, and then starting to list stuff. That's my mental picture on that.
Here's one of the problems you're going to run into with G-Man on that front, though. You know the wee bit I read out about judging hypocritically. First take the log out of your own eye and all the rest of it. Right. And also we've got the adulterous woman and let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Okay. Now, G-Man says that is not judging hypocritically. Because to be judging hypocritically, you must be guilty of the exact same sin.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Yeah, that's not what Christ actually says when it comes to the adulterous woman. He says, let he who is without sin, not let he who is without sin of adultery. And also, you're not removing the mote from your own eye to remove the mote from your brother's eye. You're removing the log.
And G-Man's case, the forest. I mean, in that story, it doesn't end with G-Man picking up a stone and saying, "I'm without sin, I'm going to throw the first stone." It ends with him saying, "Go and sin no more."
Yeah, he says, when he asks if there's anybody there to condemn her, and she says no, and he says, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Now, but G-Man's got it in his head that he can judge someone else's sin if it's a particular sin he hasn't committed.
Well,
But I saw,
he
and
dodges.
just going on a comment I've
Hang
read
on,
by
just briefly
someone.
though, because he dodges that completely and says he's not condemning them. God is. The Bible is. When God, in that moment of opportunity to condemn this woman, did not.
Exactly. Now, G-Man will then take that and say, he told her to go and sin no more, and if she does sin again, but how many times are you supposed to forgive your brother? If you as a human are expected to do that, how many times will God forgive you? That doesn't mean that you can freely go about sinning. The way Thick Shade seems to think the proof of faith is the more you sin, the stronger your faith.
That's
Right?
what I'm going to say.
Yeah, because
Run that by me again, sorry.
the more you sin, the stronger your faith is.
The
Oh,
more you
yes.
give into temptation, the stronger your faith. Wouldn't it be the more you resist temptation?
No. This was Thick Shade's brilliant idea.
Oh God, I
He's-
should have known it was Thick Shade.
Yeah. His idea was,
For a moment, I thought it was Gary.
yeah, no, his idea is that you must be really, really sure of your faith if you're confident enough to know that this dreadful sin that you do will be forgiven. And if you're really, really confident in your faith, you will be scared of sinning because you know you're forgiven. I can see how we got there. I mean, it involves ignoring all these bits about why call ye me Lord, Lord, but not do as I tell you.
Yeah.
It ignores that bit of it. But I can see how we got there.
I mean, I get that general hypocrisy is like if I'm having an affair with someone else and then I have a go at someone else having an affair.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is just going on a comment I just happened to have read by Jim W., whoever he is the hypocrisy for a Christian would be because you haven't taken the beam out of your own eye yet.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct then? Because that's the impression I got
Yeah.
from a comment I just read. And the other thing you've just reminded me of is a conversation I'm fairly sure I had with G. Well, I say a conversation with Gman. And he was coming up with, yeah, he was going on about the old, you know God exists, you just repress him so you can carry on in your sin. So I asked him, what sin am I wanting to carry on with
Uh-huh.
that I feel the need to repress God who's going to send me to this hell you talk of? Like, what am I doing now that I couldn't do as a Christian? And his response to that was basically, in a nutshell, he was pretty much saying, well, it's different when Christians sin because they can ask for forgiveness.
I'm just typing it as the G-Man's popped up now. Some weird thing.
Regardless of that.
But by that logic, wouldn't I want to be a Christian because then I could sin and ask for forgiveness?
Well,
it just made.
In terms of the whole lesbian thing, though, it gets a little deeper. Actually, that link I put up earlier, the first of the two of them, the 10 Bible passages.
10 Bible passages, yeah.
Why do you mind reading aloud the Acts reference for me, the 10:15?
Hold on a sec. Where is this?
What God has made clean.
Whereabouts is this?
Let me just grab it again. I'm going to repost it in the Skype.
It's the second one down. Acts 10:15. What God has made clean, you must not call profane.
Okay, hold on a sec.
Acts 10. Yeah, go on.
Acts 10:15. I'm going to pull it up on Bible Hub with the King James.
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to carry on reading, or do you want me to wait till you've pulled it up?
Sorry about that.
Sorry?
I'll have you grab the next one. I'll let Fiona grab this one.
Okay, it's fine. I don't mind. I was just reading it because I could see it and she couldn't.
Okay. I've got it up. Acts 10:15. Do you want me to just read 15 on its own?
If you would, please.
Okay. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common.
Now, in terms of the cleansing thing, this cleansing procedure was what the red tent was all about, ultimately.
Oh, I did not know that.
And Acts 10:15, what God has made clean, you must not call profane.
Yes.
Now, in that tent, these women, to ease cramps, would masturbate one another. This was one of the common practices to actually ease those menstrual cramps. Yet he's calling profane what God has made clean, because this is part of the cleansing process, easing each other's aches and pains, comforting one another, helping each other out. And then once they leave that tent, after that period is over, literally, they are considered to be clean.
Yeah. Although having said that, if you take the whole thing in context, then this is about what you can and cannot eat.
Yeah, it references that as well, but this does apply to this, because as we know from the Bible, these verses don't stand in complete isolation and can be applied to other things, and sometimes it must be to try to truly understand the text.
Yeah, but it is actually very specific, this, because if I go back to verse 10, and he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descended upon him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven.
Well, that makes it even more interesting, and I understand why they actually pointed it out.
Yeah, and so he then, so that was Peter. No, let me think. Hold on. So then Peter doubted what the vision should mean, because this was a vision that he had.
So basically, if God intends a thing, then these standard clean, unclean laws don't necessarily apply then.
Yes. Because that's why we can now eat bacon.
Well, here's an interesting
Very
thought, though,
fun.
regarding that. Now, back in the early days of the Bible, that first command I referenced earlier, the whole "be fruitful and multiply." Well, if he didn't want someone to multiply, would it, and made them in such a way that they wouldn't reproduce by perhaps making them attracted to somebody of the same sex, wouldn't that be God making it clean, potentially, according to that? I mean, I can't say that's necessarily the case, but if we're going to sit there and go by the long arc of the Bible instead of just sampling individual passages, this could potentially be indicating that if God wills a thing, it might not merely be a test, but what God willed for this person in their life, and might have a purpose to that. Which goes back to us not condemning, because we don't necessarily know what God's intent was in making a person a certain way. The article that we're looking at, incidentally, briefly, is on sojourners.com, and I would just like to take a second to go through their breakdown of this right quick. In Acts 10, Peter has a dream in which he is commanded by God to consume food that is deemed unclean according to Jewish law. When Peter protests, God reminds him that God's declaration of what is clean is above and may even contradict any command of the law. This dream serves as a crucial instruction for Peter. Later in the passage, when he encounters Gentiles, which Jewish law would normally reject, the passage reminds us that God's promise and beloved community are not defined by our own rules or boundaries, which goes back once again to him referencing Abraham being the devil because they're following the word of Abraham and not God. Rules and boundaries, or even our own understanding of God's law. And this goes once again to don't lean on your own understanding. The next one that's referenced on here is from Acts. Again, it's Acts 8, 26 to 40. And it's talking about what's to prevent me from being baptized. Now, if you go back to the Old Testament and some of the Hebrew traditions, somebody that essentially doesn't have, somebody that isn't physically intact as a male, we'll just say, is not allowed among the congregation. And this is talking about a eunuch and wants to keep them from being baptized. And this, once again, is, there are some things that may seem to go against former rules, former passages, because somebody that's a eunuch would not be allowed among the congregation normally. And this is kind of a rescinding of that, because we were talking about somebody that can't be fruitful and multiplied. Now, that's a cultural context, of course, that Gman wouldn't get.
They're not having sex, which is a failure to adhere to their sexual norms.
Which, of course, goes back to what Fiona said earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, when God references himself as we in the beginning, is he referring to himself as being male or female in that instant? And we're going all the way back to the beginning of Genesis with that reference.
But as well, you see, if Jade is being sinful by being homosexual, or anyone being sinful by being homosexual, and the sin is not having children, then what about infertile people?
And that's what this verse is speaking about. This is actually where that's kind of covered. The passage recounts Philip's encounter with an Ethiopian eunuch, and is probably the most cited biblical story by those seeking to affirm queer identity within the Christian faith. Eunuchs in biblical times were othered and ostracized because of their failure to adhere to sexual norms. Common cultural understandings of the times would have held that their status as eunuchs barred them from inclusion in God's community. This is once again going back to that whole not being allowed among the congregation thing. And this basically, if somebody's, well, let's be crass, if somebody's nuts were crushed, they weren't allowed in the congregation. That's, if I remember correctly, the verse is essentially saying that.
Oh, I think I remember some verse about that.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I was thinking about. Now going back to Leviticus again, and the man lying with the man, the way he lies with the woman, and all the rest of it. Now, a lot of this is to do with temple prostitution.
Hmm.
Oh, I've heard that too as well. Yeah.
Yes, and the point is that if you are not, what's supposed to be happening with a sexual relationship between two people is that they are dedicated to one another, they have love for one another, and to become one.
Now, if
And
it's merely based on lust, then I would certainly agree that there's just living in sin.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Sorry, I'll let you continue.
Right. So that's what it's about. Okay. But then you get all these men that are away from home. They're as straight as they come. If they go to one of their male pals purely for the sexual gratification, that's the problem.
Common in Roman
Because
days.
there's no love there. It is purely lust.
Hmm.
Right? And that is why I can't even bring myself to say that even if Jade wasn't celibate, she would be in sin. I can't say that. Because it's to do with purely sexual if it's purely for sexual gratification, nothing else to it. I think that's where the sin is, because it is lust. Because that would count as fornication. You're doing it purely for this physical thing. There is no connection there.
And, well, I don't think his version of Christianity really deals with the 7 deadly sins. Lust is considered one of the 7 deadly sins, not sex.
Exactly. And so that's why when I look at Leviticus, and the other, let's go back to this hoary old chestnut of the mixed fibres and the shellfish. Gman can't have it both ways. He can't use Leviticus to batter Jade over the head and then say, oh, I can wear mixed fibres because I'm under the new covenant. Well, in that case, so is Jade.
Precisely. I brought that point up with, and not particularly with Gman that I recall, but with other Christians when they're bleating on about this particular subject. I'm like,
well, at this point,
so
let me sneak in
what are you
here
wearing right
one
now?
more moment to go back to that Acts 8:26-40 reference. Once again, the common cultural understanding of the time would have held that their status as a eunuch barred them from inclusion in God's community. And yet, this eunuch seeks to follow the path of Christ. Insert lesbian here if you'd like. Sorry, seeks to follow the path of Christ, even as he continues to live out his sexual otherness because he's a eunuch and can't reproduce. And he is welcomed and joyfully baptized into Christ's community. The eunuch's question to Philip, what is to prevent me from being baptized, underscores that his sexual status is not a barrier to inclusion within the eyes of God.
Yes.
Oh.
Yep, I'm having it. Which? Hold on.
The actual verse is Acts 8:26-40, and that was this particular
26.
scholar's breakdown.
Right, I've got it. Yeah. But G-Man's not going to grasp that at all. And you know.
Well, this really highlights that our view of sexuality is something that we've kind of come up with, and God understands and judges things differently because he literally, I mean, you know, this is not a barrier in the eyes of God. You can still be Christian. Even if you have a temptation that is a form of prohibition, that temptation alone or simply your own nature does not necessarily condemn you in the eyes of God, especially if you're fighting against these temptations. The lusts, actually, in this case. Not the sexual nature you were born with, but the actual lust itself.
See, the other thing they'll get with Gman is if an atheist brings it up, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't understand the Bible because they're not Christians. If a Christian brings it up, they've just read it. I don't know. I presume that he says they've read it wrong or something. I'm not entirely sure.
No, what they do is they say that basically if you're criticising G-Man, then you're not really a Christian.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's the no true Scotsman fallacy all over again. And there is absolutely no telling him. He will only take it from somebody like Veckel or one of his pals. And even then, only after 2 weeks of calling them heretics.
Yeah, even though they have a fallout.
Does anybody here remember Mac Thomas?
Oh,
Yes.
God.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a talk with him once to try to help him find work. And I asked him, because I was going to encourage him to go into trucking or courier, if he could pass a criminal background check so he could be bondable for doing that. And he told me no, because he murdered someone.
Wait. Before anyone takes that and runs with it, yeah, this is kind of bullshit. He didn't fucking kill anyone. Spoiler, sorry, but, yeah, no rumors needed here.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that if you think about it, it's on your heart, and that's just like doing it. So yeah, he can't get a job because he thought about killing somebody, and therefore it's as good as committing the crime.
But that still wouldn't prevent you from getting a job.
No, it wouldn't. But see, in his mind, he's committed that crime because he thought about it. Because you know how you lust after a woman,
As opposed
you
to
think about it. It's just
opposed to
going
understanding
after
it and realizing that that would be
Yeah.
resisting temptation, which is godly.
Yeah.
It's
And even if he had literally murdered someone and not been caught and not got a criminal record for it, he could still get a job.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
he's under the belief that if you think a bad thought, that's just like committing the action.
Well, see, the Bible is telling you that at the moral level, hating your brother is like killing your brother. Okay?
yeah, but if
You
you met my
shouldn't-
brother,
Sorry?
so have you met my brother?
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
go on.
Right. That's on the
we're
moral
not
level.
getting into a justified homicide discussion here.
But that is not anything to do with criminal background checks.
No.
I know, but in his mind, it is that it all right because it's just like doing it.
It's like the
Well,
Ray
no,
Comfort thing of if you've ever thought, yeah, then yeah.
He's mixing up the is and the ought.
Yes.
He's saying, well, he thinks that it ought to be just as bad and codified in criminal law. But that isn't how it is.
No.
And once again, somebody has absolutely fucked with his mind based on this holier than thou, pontificating, Pharisee-like teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm guilty of slapping Gman upside the head with a clue by four
I think we all
because
are.
I've thought about it.
Apparently so.
Okay, great.
I know. It's frightening, isn't it?
Well, luckily, God does not. This God they follow does not. Sorry, that you as well as they follow does not agree with this.
Oh, hang on. Does that mean I've actually had sex with Johnny Depp then?
Well, I
Apparently
hope
so.
you
so
enjoyed
have
it.
I.
He's not
He's
very
mine.
good. I didn't even
He's
notice.
mine. He's mine.
He's
You're
not
not
very
getting
good.
him.
I didn't even notice he was there.
No, he's mine. You're not getting him. I'm sorry. You're just not getting him, D.
Now, here's the thing. The question that should be asked is all sins being equal. Now, if
Mhm.
we are to turn and we were to simply put the spotlight on one's sexual proclivities, now we're talking about the way one was made, if you're going to believe that God made everyone. God made these people to have these attractions. Now, whether that's as some kind of test for them to go through life with, as some kind of temptation specific for them to try to overcome, or whether this is simply what he intended, you can certainly debate that. But if you go to
God's
Isaiah
plan.
56, 3-5, for thus says the Lord to the eunuch who keep my Sabbath, who chooses the same things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughter. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off, which I believe is that whole names within the book of life. So this person is, chosen by God, even though they're someone that doesn't fit the sexual paradigm of the day or what might be comfortable with
Yeah.
in terms of what we consider to be norms. He's not going to be cut off from the Lord. The Lord's building a monument to him because he managed to face this adversity and move through while still keeping the covenant, while still keeping true to his faith, while still keeping true to God, regardless of his actual sexuality.
The
The
ridiculous.
first time I met Gman was the first time I met you online. We're in a hangout having quite a reasonable discussion, and then he discovered you're a Christian. And I think he booted you, and at which point I left something in the sidebar saying I can't stand this bigotry, and I left as well.
The weird thing is that
I
I
was
find
shocked,
G-Men to be
didn't I?
far more cruel to Christians than I've ever seen an atheist be.
Yeah.
That's easy. You see, the atheist, he knows who the enemy is because they're atheists. But with the Christians, he has to figure out who the enemy is first. And then they've deceived him and lied to him.
However, is it right to call somebody that's gay an enemy simply because they're gay, or to claim, we have, for example, the eunuch in the covenant in this case?
What I was going to finish off here with is the number of people who actually attend G-Man's church is 1.
Yeah.
And that's G-Man. So nobody is a Christian in his eyes.
I did watch part of his little hangout yesterday, and apparently what I noticed in that first video I responded to was pretty accurate because he once again referred to himself as the church.
Did he? Oh,
Yes.
which hangout was this?
And
I haven't
that's
seen
why
the second one about Jay.
Preaches to the choir because he's the
He
only
is the
member
choir.
of the church.
Yeah.
He's the
Drag-
preacher, the congregation, and the choir.
I mean, he's indicated twice now in almost subsequent videos that he seems to believe that he's a church unto himself.
Dragonaut was actually reading from the Bible in his hangout.
So am I to a degree, but, we'll be condemned for that as well.
Yeah.
Just on a whim, Headless, I just put in Skype the next one that's up on my list. Would you care going with that one?
Okay, do you want me to read from the Lulzcat Bible or from this one?
Let's go with this one for the moment.
Okay. Okay. This is Isaiah 56, 3-5.
43:1 actually is one where I
43:1.
just posted on
Okay.
Skype. Yeah.
Okay, Isaiah 43:1. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. This message from the prophet Isaiah emphasizes God's steadfast love and protection for God's people. This verse in particular reminds believers that we are loved and claimed by a God who redeems us and will always be with us, not out of our own achievements or deserving, but out of God's devotion. For many who are queer and or transgender, this passage can serve as a reminder that we too are called by the name and do not need to be afraid.
Yet another verse G-Man would never read or look at because...
Oh no, because it's not in Hebrews, Romans, Maccabees, Ephesians.
And Paul didn't say it.
Yeah, Paul didn't say it.
Yeah. Could I point out that the next bit that should be read straight after that one is about the fact that the shepherd does not stop looking for the lost sheep.
Mm-hmm. And
That
he
should-
also...
Where
Straight
G-Man
after-
just barbecues them straight away.
Well,
Yeah.
his behavior, this is where all those millstone comments come in, because,
Yeah.
he's, as I said the other day, as shepherds go, he's not looking for the lost sheep. He's yelling and screaming while waving around switches, chasing them off the cliff, not even realizing what he's doing or why they're falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
Here we go. Matthew 18, 12-14, or Luke 15, 3-7. Yeah, that's the millstone one.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the bit about the shepherd. It says here, we're starting, it's Matthew 18, and we're starting at verse 10. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones, for I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, Doth he not leave the 99 and goeth into the mountains and seeketh that which is gone astray? And if so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven, that one of these little ones should perish.
Yeah, condemn, lake of fire, blah, blah, blah. That's all Gman seems to know. Headless did mention a moment ago, however, that he seems to throw out the Old Testament in favor of Paul's letters. So, D, I'm going to, in Skype, pass one to you if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Have to wait till I put some cream on my hands so I can't touch them.
Oh, that's quite all right.
It's only E45 for my eczema.
He's using her lotion.
Just put it in the basket or it gets the hose again.
As soon as I said that, I thought, you idiot. Okay, Galatians 3:23 to 29. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male or female. For all of you are one in Jesus Christ. This well-known passage from Galatians is used in many contexts to sound the Christian call of unity in the face of division and difference. In fact, most of Galatians is an instruction to early Christians to embrace Gentile Christ followers, even though they do not share in their early believers' Jewish history, tradition, or laws. Paul makes clear in these verses and elsewhere that Christ's promise is abundant and available to all people, and that those divisions and prejudices that have historically kept groups of people apart or given some power to some over others have no place in Christ's community. The particular phrase, "there is no longer male or female," offers a challenge to traditional binary understandings of gender roles.
There's one here that I find a little bit interesting. It's Matthew 22:37 to 40. And if you don't mind, Fiona, being the Christian in the room, and I know I'm going to keep calling on you because you are the Christian in the room. There we go. I'm going to pop this in there just so you have the reference handy. And I'm going to ask you if you can glance through that and see how your interpretation goes. I'm going to go to the author's interpretation on this. Matthew addresses the great number of Jewish laws and prophetic teachings, including those that many consider to condemn homosexuality, by making clear that the overreaching command of a faithful life is love of God and love of neighbor. This command to love underpins any and all other commandments, and so pursuit of law-abiding faithfulness that does not first root itself in love fails to understand the true purpose of the law and the truth. And the true call of faith. And this is part of why in the discussion I did about keeping G-men away from children, I pointed out that there is no love in his message, because that is the root of Christianity, is love. Taking a moment to let Fiona skim through that. See if she agrees with the author, and I certainly do.
Do you want me to go from 36?
Well, just see if you can find anything in there that contradicts the notion of the author, and that, you know, the core of it is love.
So. If I read it from 36, so this is Matthew 22.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just double checking I've got the right one. Yeah, so 22 gives you the question, which your quote is then the answer to. Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
The core of Christianity is love. And the covenant is, as far as I'm to understand, a way for us to demonstrate our love of God and for him to understand his acceptance, or sorry, to show his acceptance of us and say, okay, I love you, but this is how I would like you to behave. But if you look at the history of Judea, there's time and time again that people or leaders, what have you, including Saul, King David themselves, have fallen away at times, yet God did not stop loving them.
Yes. I think that's something I think that gets lost when they go down the route of, this is an abomination in the eyes of God. They think that means that God will hate the person doing it. No. They forget that, and you have to go back to John 3:16 for the gospel in a nutshell. And that seems, Gman's been quoting that one quite a bit since I started quoting it, because I say that's the gospel in a nutshell. And can I read it, please? Because
oh, please do.
Verse 15 and verse 16 are coming up the same.
Must have been important to repeat it then.
Yeah, I've got a verse 15 that's saying, I've got coming up, and I think it's a mistake in Bible Gateway. 15. Wait, no, hold on. 14. Let's start at 14. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he had not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. So,
oh, sorry.
But right there, it's telling you that that faith, that absolute faith, is the crux on which the whole thing is based.
I think that pretty much answers the question I was about to ask, of that as long as you're a believer, it shouldn't matter if you're a Christian, Catholic or a Protestant.
Catholic, Protestant, gay, straight, it shouldn't matter what you are, as long as you're a believer.
It's the belief that matters.
Yeah. But can I add something else in that doesn't come across in this bit? And it's me and the guys in the bus fares again. If you believe in Christ, that means that you believe he was God made flesh. That whosoever believeth in him means those who believe he was God made flesh, and that he died for their sins, that he rose again, and that their sins are forgiven based on that sacrifice. If they choose to have him pay for those sins, i.e. if they believe in him. Okay? So what about those that don't? They need to pay for their own sins. So that takes me to the two guys in the bus. And one guy is on the bus and he's about to hand over his bus fare, and the guy behind says, "I'll get that for you, mate." Now the guy can say, "Thank you very much, that's kind of you," and accept it. And he gets to his destination free of charge. He hasn't to pay out anything. Or he can say, no, it's all right, and pay his own fare. Still gets to his destination, but he's paid himself.
I'm going to tag a little something extra on there, if you don't mind. There's a song called Choo Choo Charlie. Back in the day, there was a time period that it cost a nickel to get on the trolleys in Massachusetts and then another nickel to get off. So what happens if you got on, but you didn't have another nickel? You were stuck on that darn trolley. So this is somebody saying, okay, I know you're stuck here. Here, have another. Here's a nickel. I'll pay your way off. Well, at that point, Charlie can either say sure and get off the bus, or do not refuse it and just keep riding forever.
Yeah, we see. I see. This is why I am a universalist. I believe that all return to the Father. How you get there is different. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I think I've got a free ride. Because maybe it's the Roman Catholic part of me. But remember, I was brought up a Protestant, and I've always held this belief that unless I recognise what I've done wrong, how can I ask for the forgiveness that I want? This is a point of confession. This isn't a priest saying you are forgiven and the priest forgives you and your sins are all gone. The whole point of confession is that before you go, you've got to sit down and think of everything you've done since your last confession. You've actually got to consider all these things. What do I need to actually admit to doing that I know is wrong? You have to face up to what you've done wrong. The act of going to confession, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, blah, 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 all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
Is a way of showing that you've done that introspection.
Drama llama jing dong, and there's our word of the week, introspection. That's what that whole rant about Gman was about. In the end, when all's said and done, it's not even really about his son. He's decided what he wants to do and what his path is going to be at this point. It's about trying to urge a little introspection from G-Man, the one thing he's incapable of. Instead, he stirs up more drama, and I love that drama. Drama llama jing jong, it makes me so happy that he can't look in a mirror and see who he really is. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, I'll let you talk again. Sorry.
That you've looked at yourself and you've, right, okay, for the last week, I have done A, B, C, D, and E, right? But anybody who is truly sorry for anything that they've done wrong will actually say to the priest, look, this is what I did. And this is how I justified it to myself at the time. And they will explain and then say, and then I realised, if it's a true confession. Now, it's not the priest who judges whether it's a true confession or not. But the fact that you have actually given voice to it, to another person, you must be feeling really bad about it to be so desperate that you will admit to having done it in order to get it sorted out.
What kind of gets me is the now, granted, anyone who's really looked into it, talked to actual proper biblical scholars, etc., that know the Koine Greek, etc., and understand the context of that lovely little verse of his that he likes to quote so much to condemn others, while claiming he's not condemning them. The Bible is. If you look at that in the proper context, it was referencing temple prostitution that was going on at the time. This was from the Hellenistic tradition, which that understanding prevents it being contradictory, that in that referencing Galatians, it's stated that there is no longer male and female. Because if there's no longer male and female, then are we truly talking about a problem with homosexuals? There is no more male and female. There's merely the love of your fellow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because that's how we're supposed to look at our fellow humans. We're all in this boat together. But it seems that some are rowing in the opposite direction from others.
And G-Man is sitting at the back of the megaphone yelling, stroke, stroke, stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's yelling it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to
Oars
say.
are clashing together.
He's yelling at the other boat.
Yeah, pretty much.
Whoa, 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 whoa. That's why they're not getting anywhere, because he's yelling, whoa, 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 whoa. And they're all woeing and stopping like a horse.
Now, the whole thing that I referenced earlier, if God created these people in such a way that this is merely the kind of people they're attracted to, there's no male or female anyway, which, interestingly enough, Jade herself is sapiosexual, meaning that any sexual attraction she has is intellectual, not physical. It's not based upon that lust.
Hmm.
Well, she might be attracted to people of the same gender. It's not lust-based. She's attracted to people based upon their intellect, based upon who they are on the inside, based upon their mind, their heart, if you prefer. But the next one I'm going to jump to is Psalm 139. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This beautiful, famous psalm sings of God's intimate and intentional knowledge of each person. It suggests that every crucial part of our identity, including sexuality, was known to God, crafted by God before we were born, and that as beings made in such love, we are created good. It also suggests that there is nowhere we can go that will remove us from God's steadfast love and presence. So
like
if
that
he
one.
makes a person to be gay,
And that's where science would come in.
yep,
In
and that's why I was hoping to get Jade.
Yeah, there are certain threads of research that are suggesting that there are certain genetic and environmental factors that govern, that can affect sexuality, and that this all happens in the womb. Gman seems to think that it is a choice, you choose it. And so I would like to ask him, when did he choose to be straight?
Yeah.
If
I'd
it's
like
a
to ask him,
choice.
when did he choose to be illiterate?
There is that as well.
Well, it could certainly be implied that Matthew 15:21 through 28 encourages Christians to be mindful of their own prejudice and understand that God's love isn't as restrictive as our own.
Let's have a look.
Oh.
Matthew 15, what?
21 to 28.
21 to 28.
Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their masters.
It was 15, 21 to 28. Okay. Matthew 15, did you say?
15:21 to 28.
21 and 28. I'd just like to double check. 21 and 28. Right, there we go. Right, I'll read it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jesus went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour.
Once again, love above all.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. Now, there's only one more on the list on this. I might later go back and look through another resource that I have in here. However, the next one I want to go to is 1 John 4:7-8. And I'm just going to, thing is, it's one of the ones that's a little bit longer in terms of the titling. I'm just going to post that in Skype as well. There we go. Now, mind you, we keep talking about the difference between lusting after somebody of the same sex and loving someone of the same sex.
Yeah.
It's okay to do both, isn't it, with your husband?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Go for
Okay, just checking.
You know, lust grown out of love. I think that's perfectly healthy. And the quote I have here is, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God."
Except for Gman.
See that way. He doesn't love another.
He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love.
I have never seen any loving behaviour from Gman.
And the analysis of the author here is this passage from 1 John emphasizes the centrality of love. It suggests that love is always from God and a reflection of God. Thus, any genuine love, no matter what form it takes, comes from God and glorifies God.
Gman shows no love and glorifies himself.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just read on from that slightly?
Please do.
Let me see where I want to. Right, I'll go to verse. Gosh. Can I go all the way to the end of the chapter?
Go as far as you'd like.
Right. I'm now trying to find where you finished. That was it, right. So here we go. I'm starting at 9. In this was manifested the love of God towards us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. No man hath seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Hereby know we that we dwell in him and he in us, because he hath given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and do testify that the Father sent the Son to be the Saviour of the world. Whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in him and he in God. And we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect by love. We love him because he first loved us. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment we have we from him, that he who loveth God loveth his brother also. It's all about love.
There we go.
Yeah.
Now, I think that pretty much puts a cap on it in general. I mean, there is a lot written in that book that I do find beautiful. I do have actually quite an amount of respect for it. I think there is quite a bit of positive in it. The problem is when you have people like Gman that do nothing but focus on the negative in there, that does not show God's love, so to speak, while claiming to be godly. I've got a problem with that, on behalf of Christians often.
Yeah, there are definitely Christians that are off-putting.
Now, one thing I kind of get a kick out of is you have, the likes of Gman who sits there and yells and screams and preaches his little gospel and is so hate-filled and vitriolic. And he'll claim to be doing these Bible studies in which he's clearly not getting through to anyone. He's also driving people away from the faith, just kind of like he did with my son. Oh, and incidentally, I think I might have figured out what teaching of Gman it was that did that. His claiming to have been made a new person after being saved.
Oh,
now,
wow.
From a young child, the fear of becoming a new person and being made like Gman is, I can see that as being a terrifying notion.
So, all right. So, using your son's logic, then, G-Man becoming a new person.
Was he before?
worse? Because you're supposed to become better when you're saved.
Yeah.
So was he worse in his behavior?
That's the question, and I can see why that'd be like. I mean, I don't remember exactly how old my son was at this particular time. This was years ago. I've been referencing him essentially deconverting. And granted, deconverting, I do admit, is kind of the wrong term. It made my son no longer want to follow the path. It
Yeah.
made him no longer want to become a Christian, which is the more accurate way. But saying deconverted my son is just the more.
Yeah.
It's just a more aggressive way of saying the same. Without
Can
all
I
the
just
nuance.
highlight something that I've noticed here? It's from the bit that I just read, verse 15. Says, whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in him and he in God. Right?
Mhm.
Then the next verse says this, and we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. Full stop. And then it goes on, God is love. Semicolon. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him.
And one thing that I find interesting about that verse is that it says that you, to me, I look at the tail end of that and I say, okay, so even if you don't necessarily believe that Jesus is God, as long as you dwell in love, you may be fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the impression. It's a lovely reading, by the way, Fiona.
thank you.
It's part of why I was
People
thrilled
keep
to have
saying
her
I
here.
should. People keep saying I should do more videos about this. It was after my video of the Good Samaritan, because you know, I love that parable for all sorts of reasons, because of the layers that are on it,
Yeah.
and the biggie for me is that everybody knows that the hero of the story is the Samaritan, okay? And he's the goodie. He's the one that's the neighbour.
Yet
And
he
here's
does.
Jesus.
Yes, or he isn't a follower of Jesus. He doesn't believe in the same God. None of these things.
Well, this is the thing. Jesus is a Jew. He is preaching to the Jews. And at the time that he told that parable, the Jews and the Samaritans, they're actually, I mean, I think the beliefs are pretty similar, but each considered the other to be absolutely heretical.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus made him the hero of the story. Jesus made the heretic the neighbour of the injured man in the ditch. In other words, does it matter about the faith? It doesn't matter if you think it's heretical. It's the one who did what was needed at the time. The one who poured the oil on his wounds and bound his wounds and put him on his donkey and took him to the inn and paid the innkeeper to look after him. In the here and now, the material, he did what was required when you have an injured person. Just like you feed the hungry, you clothe the naked, you minister to the sick. All of this is what we do in the here and now. And Jesus made the Samaritan, the heretic, the heathen, the despised one. He made him the hero of the story. And that's why I'm saying, unless you know of the relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans at the time, you miss that whole part of the parable. Stuff the belief.
Cultural context is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Stuff
Yeah, I
the
didn't know
stuff
that stuff.
doctrine. Yeah. Doctrine has nothing to do with it. And that's why I get so annoyed when Gman goes on about whether it be Roman Catholics or whatever.
Yeah.
Because in the parable of the Good Samaritan, because of all the layers that are in it, it again encompasses Christianity in a nutshell.
One of my favorite musicians, one of my favorite recording artists, is a guy that goes by the name of Voltaire. I actually, on my channel, do have a clip. I saw him at one of his shows and had him record something for me. There's this one song he does that I absolutely love, which is simply called God Thinks You're an Idiot. And I'd swear he could have been singing it to Gman.
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is, I asked him to basically just do the line from the song, you know, God thinks you're an idiot. Just so that I would have a clip of him saying that I could use, because I can't use the actual track itself. Because even with his permission to use it, there's the recording company. I'd need to get permission through them, and that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So I just wanted a clip of him saying it. And the thing that struck me about it is that he refused to just say, G-Man, God thinks you're an idiot. He didn't personally know the man. He refused to condemn him.
Hello, my name's Voltaire, and I just want to remind you that God may think you're an idiot. It really depends on what you're doing. But you'll never know, would it?
Which I thought was fascinating, because this is a fellow atheist.
Well, I mean, to be honest, and maybe it's because I'm British rather than American, I was shocked to discover there were Christians like G-Man and Ran Campbell. Because maybe, I'm sure there are some here in the UK. I've never met a Christian like the people I meet. Some of the Christians I meet on YouTube.
Jason Bird.
I didn't know there were people who felt so horrendously towards Catholics and thought that they weren't Christians. I just don't meet people like, I don't think anyone meets people like G-Man in real life. But what I do find interesting is that the Christians that I would say are more spiritual seem to be the Christians that these hateful Christians don't like. I remember being in one of Brian's Friday Fails, and myself and IG were talking. Now, I'll admit I'm not very likely to convert, you know, sort of, this is not very likely. But the way G-Man and I, sorry, IG.
Okay.
The way IG and I was talking, I felt quite spiritual at the time. It was a really nice, uplifting feeling. It was a good conversation. And then Ran Campbell joined the hangout.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like gone.
Yeah.
In the blink of an eye.
Yeah. Dee, can I ask you to do me a favour, right?
You can ask.
And I'm not, listen, this is not me trying to convert you or anything, but could you go to my channel and have a look at my Good Samaritan thing and tell me if you think I managed to explain it in the way I managed to explain it here tonight?
I would imagine you did, but I will check it out. Let me write that down, because...
Yeah, the reason I ask is because, I mean, I don't tend to do that very often. I don't do talking head videos, etc.
Well, I don't do Bible studies very often, but I feel like the ones that I do go pretty well.
This has been brilliant.
Okay.
And I've also been putting together a video, but it's just slides responding to G-Man, and I don't know whether to actually post it or not. I need to find some background music for it and all the rest of it, but it is just slides, which might be too boring for some people. And it's
slideshows are an old classic tradition.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about something here. Near the beginning of this, you mentioned with the whole God testing G-Man with the safe and the money that was in the safe, whether he keeps it or gives it away or tries to return it. So how was God testing G-Man when God put 3 baby skunks in his path while he was bicycling through the park, and he stops and picks them up?
Now that one I have no idea, because I don't think he prayed for skunks in that.
Oh, that reminds me of Jim Caviezel, actually. During the filming of The Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel was struck by lightning while on the cross, and they took this as a positive sign?
What?
Yeah.
What?
Gosh.
Well, they were filming While they were filming The Passion of the Christ, there's a scene at which, and it's a big metal framed cross, and they have Jim Caviezel on there, that guy that's playing Jesus. And during the shooting of it, lightning struck.
Wow.
And these people that believe in God. No, he didn't. But yeah, he had some issues.
Fire. No.
But they didn't take this as a word of caution from the divine, and that's what amazed me. God approved of this.
What? Why did stick him up in a big lightning rod?
Oh, I know. There's the basic side of it, but I'm saying if you're looking at it from a Christian point of view, this might be telling you you're doing things wrong.
Yeah. You see,
Maybe the Jesus creating chairs was a step too far.
See, I
It was
I mean,
a table, I
everybody
think
knows.
it was.
No, it was he. I thought he invented tables so they could, sorry, chairs so they could sit at the table.
Good
I,
idea.
I
Oh,
thought he
I'd
made a
have to double
table for
check.
a tall guy to stand at to eat.
See, I mean, everybody knows that we all get Roman Catholics get shouted at for this, praying to Mary and all the rest of it. I don't think that God Himself gives a damn about the wee things in doctrine, the little differences and all the rest of it. You see,
It was kind of
if
like a
we
new covenant, wasn't it?
if we go back to when Christ was roaming about, talking to people, they weren't writing it down. They weren't doing exegesis or eisegesis. They were just sitting, listening to him talk. They weren't looking at the grammar and the structure and trying to pull meanings out of it that weren't there. It was simple. He spoke. They listened.
Yeah.
They learned.
You know what? Let's try that again. Take two. Drink. Hello, my name is Voltaire, and I want to remind you that God may very well think you're an idiot, and you'll never know. So, don't imagine you know what God thinks. Just do what you think is right.
Oh, shit, it's over. Well, thank you for those of you who joined us. Once again, this is not normal channel content here. But at the same point, with all G-Mans going after Jade for, well, frankly, simply being Jade, I thought that somebody should step forward and make a defense, and he was insisting that nobody possibly could, and I was definitely up for the challenge. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I hope that if G-Men and his sort ever come across it, that they actually learn something from it. You know, maybe a little bit of tolerance, maybe a little bit of temperance, maybe that the real message of that book that he likes to yell and scream about isn't burn, hellfire, repent, but love one another and be kind. And on that note, I'm going to stop the broadcast, and thanks for watching. And this takes about 10 seconds.